He called her his simple, sweet girl, the quiet artist who painted sunsets and dreamed of a small cottage by the sea. Julian Vance, a tech millionaire on the rise, loved the story of how he'd saved her from a life of obscurity. But while Elara Vance was growing their child, Julian was building a new life with another woman, a woman he believed was his ticket to the inner circle. He threw his pregnant wife out into the cold San Francisco night, telling her she was worthless. He had no idea he hadn't just discarded his wife. He had awakened a titan, because his simple girl was no ordinary artist. She was Elara Prescott, the sole heiress to a multi-billion-dollar empire, and she was about to reclaim her name. The morning light in their Pacific Heights apartment was a painter's dream, soft and golden, spilling across the wide plank oak floors. Elara Vance cherished this light. It was the one constant in a life that felt lately like a beautifully rendered painting with a single jarring brush stroke she couldn't quite identify. She stood before her easel, the scent of turpentine and oil paints mingling with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee from the kitchen. On the canvas was a landscape, a hazy, dreamlike vision of the Big Sur coastline. But her mind was elsewhere. Her hand rested instinctively on the gentle curve of her belly, a 5-month swell that was both a promise and a source of a quiet, gnawing anxiety. Julian found her there, already dressed in one of his impeccably tailored Tom Ford suits, a vision of modern success. He was all sharp lines and expensive cologne, a stark contrast to her paint-splattered overalls and the gentle chaos of her art studio. "Still at it, my love," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. He kissed the top of her head, his eyes glancing at the canvas with a practiced, appreciative smile that didn't quite reach them. "It's beautiful, as always." "Just trying to capture the fog," she murmured, leaning into his touch. "It's tricky. You'll get it. You always do." He glanced at his platinum Patek Philippe watch. "I have to run. Early meeting with the board at Sterling Corp. It's the big one. If this acquisition goes through..." He let the sentence hang in the air, glittering with a future she knew he craved. Julian Vance was a man built of ambition. He'd clawed his way up from a middle-class background to become a millionaire through a savvy tech startup. But a millionaire in San Francisco was, in his own words, just another guy in a Patagonia vest. He wanted more. He wanted a seat at the table with the old money titans, the families whose names were etched onto university buildings and museum wings. He wanted to be a name whispered with reverence, not just another tech bro with a successful exit. Elara had always loved his drive, but lately it felt different. It had become a hungry, insatiable thing that was starting to consume the man she'd fallen in love with. The man who once spent an entire weekend with her in a tiny cabin with no cell service, just a fireplace and a stack of old books. "You'll be brilliant," she said, forcing a smile. "They'll love you. They have to," he said, his jaw tightening for a fraction of a second. He straightened his tie. "Don't wait up for me tonight. There's a networking dinner at the St. Regis afterward. Have to press the flesh you know she knew." The dinners, the galas, the weekend retreats. They had become more frequent, stretching late into the night. He always came home smelling of expensive whiskey and a faint floral perfume that wasn't hers. She'd tried to dismiss it. A city of powerful women, handshakes, polite hugs. It could be anything. But the excuse was wearing thin, just like the reassurances in his eyes. That evening, the apartment felt cavernous and silent. Elara made herself a simple dinner and ate it while scrolling through photos from their early years together. There they were younger, laughing on a wind-swept beach, their clothes cheap, their faces alight with a joy that seemed so pure, so untouchable. A lump formed in her throat. Where had that man gone? Her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a tag on Instagram. A friend, Chloe, had been at a gallery opening downtown. The photo was a candid group shot. In the background, partially obscured but unmistakable, was Julian. He wasn't at the St. Regis. He was at a trendy art gallery in Soma. His arm draped possessively around the waist of a striking woman with fiery red hair and a dress that looked like spun gold. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her hand resting intimately on his chest. Elara's heart seized. She recognized the woman from the society pages, Sienna Laurent, a notorious socialite and daughter of a minor real estate mogul. She was everything Elara was not: loud, glamorous, and relentlessly public. Elara zoomed in her fingers, trembling. The intimacy was undeniable. The way he looked at her with a raw hunger she hadn't seen directed at herself in years. The caption on the photo read, "Amazing night, celebrating art and new connections." New connections. The euphemism was a slap in the face. She looked around her beautiful apartment at the life she had so carefully built, a life of quiet love and creativity she thought they both wanted. The golden morning light now seemed like a cruel mockery. The single jarring brushstroke on her perfect painting was no longer a mystery. It was a gaping tour right through the center of the canvas. Her phone vibrated again, a text from Julian this time. "Board meeting running super late. This deal is a monster. I'll be home as soon as I can. Love you." The lie was so blatant, so lazy, it was almost more insulting than the truth in the photograph. Elara sank onto the sofa, the phone slipping from her numb fingers. The baby gave a soft kick, a tiny, innocent flutter against the wall of her crushing despair. She had thought her greatest fear was the fog on the canvas being too difficult to capture. She was wrong. Her greatest fear was living inside a masterpiece of deceit, and the artist was the man she called her husband. The days that followed the discovery were a masterclass in self-torture. Elara became a detective in her own home, a ghost haunting the edges of her husband's life. She didn't confront him. Not yet. A cold, terrifying part of her wanted to know the full extent of the rot before she took a sledgehammer to the foundations. The evidence mounted with sickening speed. There were the credit card statements she found while looking for a misplaced bill. Receipts from Cartier for a diamond tennis bracelet she had never received. Dinners at Quince and Saison on nights he was supposedly working late. Hotel charges at the exclusive Post Ranch Inn in Big Sur. A place they had always dreamed of going together for their anniversary, booked for a weekend, he had claimed was a solo business trip to Seattle. The pain was a physical thing, a constant pressure behind her ribs. His phone, once a mundane object, became a venomous serpent on the nightstand. One night while he was in the shower, it buzzed incessantly. She picked it up, her heart hammering against her ribs. The screen was locked, but the notifications lit it up previews of messages from Sienna L. "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. Did you see the new feature on me in SF Monthly? You know you love dating a celebrity. I told my father all about your new venture. He's very impressed. We should all have dinner." The last message was the key. This wasn't just a sordid affair. It was a transaction. Sienna wasn't just a mistress. She was an investment in the future Julian so desperately wanted. Her father, Charles Laurent, was a gatekeeper to the world of old money and established power. Julian wasn't just cheating on Elara. He was trading her in for a better model one, with the right connections and the right pedigree. He was using Sienna to climb, and Sienna was using him for the thrill and the proximity to new money, and they were two sides of the same tarnished coin. Elara felt a wave of nausea so profound she had to grip the edge of the dresser. He thought she was the one holding him back. Her quiet life, her lack of interest in the glitzy social scene, her contentment with love over status. He saw it all as a liability. The change in Julian was palpable. He grew more critical, his compliments acquiring a sharp, backhanded edge. "You know, Elara, you should really come to some of these events with me," he said one evening, loosening his tie. "You're a brilliant artist, but you hide your light under a bushel. You need to network to be seen." "I'm not a networker, Julian." "I'm a painter," she replied softly, the words tasting like ash. "And honestly, I'm not sure your crowd would know what to do with a pregnant woman in a paint-splattered shirt." He sighed, a gust of theatrical frustration. "That's what I mean. Your perspective is so small. This is our future I'm building. For us, for the baby. Don't you want to be a part of that?" Sienna Laurent was at the gala last night. Her father basically runs the real estate game in this city. She understands the importance of image, of being present. He had said her name. He had dropped her name into their conversation with such casual cruelty, testing the waters, daring her to react. Elara's blood ran cold. She kept her expression placid, a mask of gentle indifference she was becoming frighteningly good at wearing. "I'm sure she does," Elara said, turning back to the dishes in the sink, her knuckles white on the sponge. Her friends noticed the change too. Chloe, her closest confidant since art school, met her for lunch at a small cafe in Hayes Valley. "You're too pale, Elara," Chloe said, her brow furrowed with concern. "And you've barely touched your food. Is it Julian? Is that workaholic finally driving you insane?" Elara's composure crumbled. The whole sordid story spilled out. The photo, the texts, the credit card bills. Tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed streamed down her face, hot with betrayal and humiliation. Chloe listened, her expression hardening from sympathy to pure fury. "That absolute bastard," she hissed, her hand covering Elara's. "While you're at home pregnant with his child, I want to key his Tesla. No, I want to set it on fire." "What do I do, Chloe?" Elara whispered, her voice cracking. "Our whole life is a lie. This home, our future. It's all built on his ambition and my supposed simplicity." "His loss," Chloe said fiercely. "He has no idea who he's messing with. He sees a quiet painter. I see one of the strongest women I know. You need to decide what you want. Do you want to fight for him?" Elara looked out the window at the bustling street. "Fight for him. Fight for the man who saw her, their child and their life together, as an obstacle to his social climbing. The man who was parading another woman around town while she nurtured the most vulnerable piece of them both." "No," Elara said, a sudden surprising clarity cutting through the fog of her grief. "I don't want to fight for him. I want to fight for me and for my baby." That night, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Julian came home late, smelling strongly of champagne and Sienna's cloying perfume. He was agitated, pacing the living room as he talked on the phone in a hushed, urgent tone. "No, of course she doesn't know. She's completely oblivious. Thinks I'm a hero for working so hard. It's for the best, Sienna. A clean break. Once this sterling deal is closed, my position will be solidified. I can't be anchored to a quiet domestic life anymore. It's not the image I need. He was planning to leave her. After the deal was done. He was going to wait until he had secured his next rung on the ladder, and then cut the rope, leaving her to fall. The coldness of it, the calculated cruelty, extinguished the last embers of love she had been clinging to. He didn't see an anchor. He saw a dead weight. Elara slipped back into the bedroom, her movements silent. She stood in the darkness, one hand on her belly, and made a decision. He wanted a clean break. He had no idea what kind of break was coming. He thought he was in control of the narrative, the director of his own ascent. He thought she was just a minor character, a part of his origin story he was about to write out of the script. But he had forgotten to read her character's full biography, and the next chapter was about to be a shock. The storm broke on a Tuesday. It was a day like any other, grey and drizzly, the kind of San Francisco day that seeped into your bones. Elara had spent the morning on the phone, making arrangements she never thought she would have to make her voice steady and low. A stark contrast to the maelstrom inside her. She felt a strange, chilling calm. The time for tears was over. Julian was working from home, a rare occurrence. He was on edge, constantly checking his phone, waiting for the final confirmation of the Sterling Corp acquisition. This deal was his magnum opus, the transaction that would elevate him from a common millionaire to a serious player. He was so consumed by it that he barely noticed the quiet determination in Elara's eyes, or the way she moved through their apartment, not as a resident, but as a visitor taking a final look around. She waited until late afternoon when the light began to fade. She walked into his home office, where he was hunched over his laptop. She didn't speak, just placed a small velvet Cartier box on his desk. It was the box for the tennis bracelet. She had found it tucked away in the back of his closet that morning. He looked up, startled. His eyes darted from her face to the box, and a flicker of panic crossed his features. "Elara, what's this? I believe it's for Sienna," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I wouldn't want her to think you'd forgotten about her. I also found the receipts for your romantic getaway to Big Sur. I hope you two enjoyed the view. We always wanted to go there." The blood drained from Julian's face. The charming, ambitious mask fell away, revealing something ugly and cornered beneath. What are you talking about?" "You've been going through my things." "I've been opening my eyes," she corrected him calmly. She slid a manila folder onto the desk next to the box. Inside were printouts, the Instagram photo, copies of the credit card statements with the incriminating charges circled in red, transcripts of the text messages from his phone she had photographed while he slept. It was a comprehensive, damning portfolio of his betrayal. He stared at it, speechless. For a moment, she saw a flash of what might have been shame. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by a defensive rage. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "So what if I have?" He snarled, his voice rising. "What did you expect? Did you really think this was enough for me? This quiet little life? Painting your sad little pictures while I'm out there, trying to build an empire. I need a partner, Elara, not a hobbyist." The cruelty of his words was breathtaking. "A hobbyist," she repeated, her voice dangerously low. "I am carrying your child, Julian. Is that a hobby too? A part of the quiet little life you're so desperate to escape? Oh, don't you dare use the baby against me." He spat, his face contorted with fury. Maybe the baby is the whole problem. A trap. A way to keep me anchored to this mediocrity forever. Sienna understands me. She understands ambition. She isn't afraid of the world. She wants to conquer it with me. Each word was a physical blow. He was not just confessing. He was eviscerating their entire life together. Everything she thought they had built. He was rewriting their history to cast her as the villain, the anchor holding back his magnificent ship. "I see," she said, her calm voice a stark contrast to his raving. "So this is it. This is who you really are." "Yes, this is who I am," he shouted, gesturing wildly around the apartment. "And I want this life back. I want my life back. I want you out. You want me out?" she asked, a humorless smile touching her lips. "Your pregnant wife. You want me to leave, yes? Now pack a bag and go. Go to your friend Chloe's. Go to a hotel, I don't care. I'll have your things sent to you. My lawyer will be in touch about the arrangements." He couldn't even say the word divorce. He waved a dismissive hand as if she were an annoying assistant he was firing. The finality of it, the utter lack of remorse, solidified something within her. The hurt was still there, a deep, cavernous wound. But surrounding it now was a wall of ice. She had given this man her heart, her body, her future. He had taken it all and deemed it worthless. "Fine," she said. The single word seemed to hang in the air, more powerful than all his shouting. She turned and walked to their bedroom, the one they had shared, and pulled a small, pre-packed duffel bag from the closet. It contained only the essentials. Toiletries, a change of clothes, a worn copy of her favorite book, and a small framed photo of her mother. She left behind everything he had ever bought her, the clothes, the jewelry, the life he had curated for her. When she walked back into the living room, he was on the phone, his back to her. "It's handled," he was saying, his voice low and triumphant. "She's leaving now. Yes, a clean break. We're free, Sienna." Elara walked past him without a word, her footsteps silent on the expensive rug. She opened the front door. The rain was coming down harder now, a relentless, cleansing torrent. She didn't look back. As she stepped out into the hallway, she heard him say one last thing into the phone, a final cutting remark meant for her to overhear. "Don't worry about her. She's a nobody. She has nothing. She'll be fine." The heavy door clicked shut behind her, a punctuation mark on the end of her life as Elara Vance. Standing in the dimly lit hallway, the sound of the San Francisco rain. Her only companion, she felt a profound sense of loss, but also something else, a flicker of liberation. He was right about one thing. Elara Vance was a nobody. She had nothing. But he was about to meet Elara Prescott. And she had everything. The first few hours were a blur of shock and cold, wet misery. Elara found herself walking aimlessly through the rain-slicked streets of Pacific Heights, the duffel bag a meager weight in her hand. The grand Victorian homes, once symbols of her shared life with Julian, now seemed to loom over her, their windows like judging eyes. Every laughing couple she passed, huddled under an umbrella, was a fresh stab of pain. He had called her a nobody. He had thrown her out, pregnant and alone, with the casual indifference of someone discarding old furniture. She couldn't go to Chloe. Not yet. She couldn't bear the thought of pity of her friend's righteous anger. She needed to be alone, to let the raw agony of the moment wash over her. She ended up at a cheap motel on Lombard Street, the kind with flickering neon signs and threadbare carpets. She paid in cash using the emergency $100 bill she kept tucked in her wallet. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and disinfectant. It was the absolute antithesis of her former life, and in a strange way that felt appropriate. She sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, the city lights painting shifting patterns on the grimy window. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation faded, leaving behind a hollow, aching void. Sobs racked her body, raw and guttural sounds of a heart breaking. She cried for the man she had loved, for the baby, who would never know him as she once had, for the future that had been stolen from her. She cried until she was empty, until there were no tears left. In the depths of that despair, a new feeling began to surface. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something harder, something forged in the fire of Julian's betrayal. It was resolve. He had underestimated her. He had looked at her quiet nature and mistaken it for weakness. He had seen her simple life and mistaken it for a lack of ambition. He had made the biggest mistake of his life. She had run away from her name and her family years ago, suffocated by the expectations and the gilded hoard of being a Prescott. She had craved a normal life, a love that was genuine and untainted by her fortune. She had wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she was worth. And in her quest for authenticity, she had found the most profound deception of all. The irony was so bitter it almost made her laugh. Her father, Alistair Prescott, was a formidable, ruthless man. He controlled a global logistics empire with an iron fist and had never approved of her bohemian life, and especially not of Julian, whom he had met once and dismissed as a common opportunist. Elara hadn't spoken to him in over a year. Calling him felt like a defeat, a retreat back to the life she had fought so hard to escape. But she wasn't calling him. Her fingers, still trembling slightly, found her phone. She scrolled through her contacts past Chloe, past art gallery owners and old friends to a name she hadn't dialed in 5 years. The contact was simply labeled Kensington. Arthur Kensington was not just the Prescott family's chief legal counsel. He was their fixer, their strategist, a man of unwavering loyalty and terrifying efficiency, who had been by her father's side for 40 years. He had always been kind to Elara, a calm, grandfatherly presence in her tumultuous high society childhood. She pressed the call button. He answered on the first ring. "Elara," he said. His voice was exactly as she remembered, calm, deep, and utterly unflappable. There was no surprise, no judgment, just a quiet acknowledgement. "Arthur," she said, her voice raspy from crying. "I need your help." She didn't need to explain everything. She simply said, "My marriage is over. Julian asked me to leave. I'm at a motel on Lombard Street." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. Not of hesitation, but of processing. Of gears turning in a mind that moved with the precision of a Swiss watch. "Stay where you are," he said. Finally, his tone shifting from gentle concern to crisp command. "Do not answer the door for anyone. Do not contact Julian. A car will be there in 20 minutes. It will be a black Mercedes Maybach. The driver's name is Thomas. He will ask you if you are expecting a package from Sterling. You will say yes. Do you understand?" The mention of Sterling, the name of the corporation Julian was so desperate to conquer, was a deliberate, chilling touch. "Yes," she whispered. "I understand." "Good girl," Arthur said, the old term of endearment, a soothing balm on her raw nerves. "We'll take care of everything. It's time you came home." 20 minutes later, A sleek, impossibly black Maybach glided to a stop in front of her motel room, its quiet purr a stark contrast to the rattling neon sign above. A man in a dark suit. Thomas stepped out and knocked softly on her door. Through the peephole, she saw his stoic, professional face. "Are you expecting a package from Sterling?" he asked through the door. "Yes," she replied, her voice steady. He opened the door for her. As she stepped out of the dingy motel room and into the plush, leather-scented interior of the Maybach, it felt like crossing a threshold between two worlds. The world of Elara Vance, the betrayed wife, the discarded nobody, was behind her. As the car pulled away, silently navigating the wet streets, Thomas handed her a tablet from the front seat. "Mr. Kensington asked me to give you this, Ms. Prescott. It's a preliminary asset and background report on Julian Vance and Sienna Laurent. He thought you might want to be brought up to speed." Her name. Miss Prescott. The sound of it was both foreign and familiar. She looked at the tablet. On the screen was a detailed dossier, complete with financial records, business holdings and personal associations. Arthur's team had already compiled a complete picture of the man who thought she had nothing. A slow, cold smile touched Elara's lips for the first time that night. Julian wanted to build an empire. He had no idea he had just declared war on one. The phoenix was rising, and she was ready to burn his carefully constructed world to the ground. The annual San Francisco Benefactors Gala was the pinnacle of the city's social calendar. It was a glittering affair, held in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel. A sea of couture gowns bespoke tuxedos and heirloom jewels. To be seen here was to have arrived. And tonight, Julian Vance was not just seen. He was celebrated. The news of his successful acquisition of Sterling Corp had broken that afternoon. It was the talk of the town. He had done it. He had single-handedly orchestrated a hostile takeover of a legacy manufacturing firm, a move that would triple his net worth and catapult him into the financial stratosphere. He stood near the champagne fountain, a glass of Dom Perignon in his hand. Sienna Laurent clinging to his arm. She was radiant in a crimson gown, her laughter loud and triumphant. They were the city's new power couple. "I knew you could do it, darling." Sienna purred loud enough for those around them to hear. "You're a shark, Julian. A beautiful, brilliant shark." Julian's chest swelled with pride. This was everything he had ever wanted. The deference in people's eyes, the hushed whispers of admiration, the weight of a truly powerful woman on his arm. He scanned the room, a king surveying his court. He felt a brief, fleeting thought for Elara. He imagined her huddled in some cheap apartment, crying over her canvases. A necessary casualty, he told himself. A footnote in his biography. He had sent his lawyer a preliminary divorce offer that morning, a settlement so insultingly low it was designed to make her go away quietly. He hadn't heard back. He assumed she was too devastated to even respond. As the evening's host, a silver-haired philanthropist named Eleanor Vance. No relation, a fact that had always secretly annoyed, Julian took the stage to begin the speeches. The grand ballroom doors at the far end of the room swung open. A man stepped through, flanked by two others, in dark, impeccably tailored suits. He was in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair, and a presence that commanded instant silence. He wore a simple dark suit, yet he radiated more power and authority than anyone else in the room. It was Arthur Kensington. A ripple of confusion and recognition went through the crowd. Arthur Kensington never attended social events. He was a creature of the boardroom and the courtroom, a legendary legal mind, who operated in the shadows on behalf of one of the world's most reclusive and powerful families. His presence here was an anomaly, an omen. Julian felt a prickle of unease. He recognized Kensington from financial journals. What was he doing here? Arthur Kensington walked calmly toward the stage, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet room. He nodded respectfully to Eleanor Vance, who looked completely bewildered, and took the microphone. "Good evening." Arthur's voice boomed through the speakers, calm and resonant. "Forgive the intrusion. My name is Arthur Kensington. I am Chief Counsel for the Prescott family and Prescott Global." A collective gasp went through the ballroom. The Prescott name was legend. A dynasty shrouded in privacy survives, their wealth estimated to be in the tens of billions, their influence touching every corner of the globe. Julian's heart began to beat a little faster. He exchanged a confused look with Sienna. "I am here tonight on behalf of the family's sole heiress." Arthur continued, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed with laser-like precision on Julian Vance, an heiress who for the past several years has chosen to live a quiet life here in San Francisco, seeking privacy and authenticity away from the burdens of her name. Many of you know her, though you did not know who she was. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Julian felt a cold dread begin to creep up his spine. It couldn't be. It was impossible. She has recently been the victim of a profound and cruel betrayal. Arthur said, his voice hardening slightly, and has therefore decided it is time to reclaim her identity. We are here tonight to announce the launch of a new philanthropic venture, the Elara Foundation, dedicated to supporting emerging artists and single mothers. The foundation will be seeded with an initial endowment of $500 million. The amount was staggering. Jaws dropped. $500 million. That was more than Julian's entire net worth, even after the Sterling deal. Arthur paused for dramatic effect. The foundation, of course, is named for its founder and chairwoman, the woman you all knew as Elara Vance, but whom the world will now know again by her birth name, Elara Prescott. The name hit the room like a thunderclap. Every head in the ballroom swiveled in unison to stare at Julian. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. His skin was ashen, his mouth slightly agape. The Dom Perignon glass slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Sienna Laurent took a half-step back from him, her eyes wide with horrified realization. The man she had attached herself to, the man she thought was her ticket to the next level, was not a shark. He was a fool who had just thrown away the Hope diamond because he thought it was a piece of glass. She looked at Julian with a new expression, utter contempt. Julian's mind was reeling. Elara. His quiet, simple Elara. A Prescott, the shy artist who wore second-hand clothes and drove a 10-year-old Subaru, was the heiress to one of the largest fortunes on the planet. It was a cosmic joke, a nightmare from which he couldn't wake. All his striving, all his desperate climbing, all his machinations to get a seat at the table. And he had been married to the woman who owned the table all along. He remembered his last words to her. "She's a nobody. She has nothing." The memory burned through him with the force of a physical acid. Arthur Kensington's gaze was still locked on him. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice now laced with ice. "I believe you have some legal correspondence from my office that has gone unanswered. I would advise you to read it very carefully. Ms. Prescott wishes you well in your future endeavors, whatever they may be." With a final dismissive nod, Arthur stepped down from the stage and walked out of the ballroom as quietly as he had entered. He left behind a scene of social carnage. Julian Vance stood alone in a circle of silence, the shattered glass at his feet, a perfect metaphor for his life. The whispers started immediately, a wave of rumor and schadenfreude that crashed over him. His triumph had turned to public humiliation in the space of 2 minutes. He was no longer the brilliant shark. He was the biggest idiot in San Francisco history. And his reckoning had only just begun. The fallout was not a storm. It was a quiet, systematic demolition. Julian had expected shouting lawsuits, a messy public divorce. What he got was far worse. It was the silent, invisible hand of the Prescott Empire, dismantling his life piece by piece with chilling precision. The day after the gala, the Sterling Corp deal, his crowning achievement, collapsed. The financing from the primary investment bank was inexplicably pulled. The official reason given was a sudden and unforeseen reassessment of market risk. The unofficial reason was a single 5-minute phone call from Arthur Kensington to the bank's CEO, a man who sat on 2 charity boards, chaired by Alastair Prescott. Julian's own company, Vance Innovations, began to hemorrhage. Key clients suddenly terminated their contracts, citing vague strategic realignments. His top engineers were poached by a rival firm, with offers so astronomically high he couldn't possibly match them. His board of directors, men who had clapped him on the back just days before, now refused to take his calls. He was an outcast, a pariah. The Prescott name was a spectre haunting his every move. No one wanted to do business with the man who had publicly humiliated the Prescott heiress. Sienna Laurent was the first to abandon the sinking ship. She met him for coffee at a place where they were sure to be seen, her expression cold and clinical. "This is over, Julian," she said, not even bothering to sit down. "My father is furious. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? How it makes my family look? I attached my name to yours, and you turned out to be a fraud." "A fraud," he sputtered, incredulous. "I'm the same man I was last week." "No, you're not," she said with a dismissive flick of her wrist. "Last week you were a brilliant up-and-comer. Today you're a cautionary tale. You had the entire world in your hands, and you threw it away for a cheap thrill. You're toxic. I can't be associated with you." She turned and walked away without a backward glance, leaving him to pay the bill. His life became a series of closed doors. His membership at the Olympic Club was under review. His reservations at his favorite restaurants were mysteriously lost. He was a ghost in a city that had once adored him. The Pacific Heights apartment, the symbol of his success, now felt like a prison. Every object reminded him of Elara, of his monumental, life-altering stupidity. He found one of her unfinished paintings in the studio, a landscape of the sea. He realized now she wasn't painting a simple cottage. She was painting the view from the private Prescott estate in Carmel, a place he would never see. Finally broken and desperate, he managed to get a message to Elara through her new lawyers, begging for a meeting. She agreed. She chose the venue, a minimalist, light-filled conference room, in the offices of her new foundation. When Julian was shown in, he was struck by her transformation. She was no longer the soft, unassuming artist. She wore a tailored Alexander McQueen suit. Her hair was styled impeccably, and her eyes, once full of gentle adoration, were now clear and resolute. The pregnancy was more pronounced, and she carried it with an air of regal strength. She was every bit the Prescott heiress. "Elara," he began, his voice cracking. "I am so sorry. I was a fool. An arrogant, blind fool. I didn't know. "That's the point, Julian," she interrupted, her voice calm and even. "You didn't know. Your love, your respect. It was all conditional on my perceived status. You didn't love Elara, the artist. You would have loved Elara Prescott, the heiress, and I can't forgive that. You didn't just betray our marriage. You betrayed the very idea of unconditional love I was so naive to believe in." "Let me fix it," he pleaded, taking a step forward. "I'll do anything. I love you. I realize that. Now. I love you, and I love our baby." "No," she said, and the word was a final, unyielding wall. "You love what I can give you. Access, power, a name. You threw me out, Julian. You called me a nobody and told me to leave while I was carrying your child. There is no coming back from that. Our child will know its father, but it will be on my terms. You will have no legal or financial claim to the Prescott estate, and you will not use our child as a pawn." She slid a document across the polished table. It was a divorce settlement. It was generous, far more than he deserved. It provided him with enough to start over, to disappear quietly. But it also contained ironclad clauses of non-disclosure and relinquishment of any future claims. It was a golden parachute into obscurity. "Sign it, and this all stops," she said. "The financial pressure, the social isolation. It ends. You'll be free to go and build a new life far away from here. If you fight me, if you try to make this difficult." She let the threat hang in the air, unspoken, but perfectly clear. If he fought her, Arthur Kensington and the full weight of the Prescott Empire would crush him into dust. He looked at the woman before him, this stranger who wore his wife's face. He saw no hint of weakness, no flicker of the old Elara who would have forgiven him. That woman was gone, and he had killed her. With a trembling hand, Julian Vance, the man who had wanted to conquer the world, picked up the pen and signed his surrender. 1 year later, the fog over the Golden Gate Bridge was a soft, diffusing blanket just beginning to yield to the insistent warmth of the late morning sun. From her office on the top floor of the Prescott Foundation building, Elara had a panoramic view of this transformation, a daily metaphor she had come to appreciate. She could see the city awakening, the bay sparkling with nascent light, the entire landscape of a life she had painstakingly built from the rubble of her old one. The office was a testament to her new identity. It was not the opulent mahogany-paneled chamber her father would have chosen. Instead, it was an airy minimalist space filled with light, clean lines and, most importantly, art. The walls were a rotating gallery for the vibrant, challenging pieces created by the young, undiscovered artists her foundation now championed. In the corner where the best light fell stood one of her own works in progress on a large easel. It was a powerful and abstract piece, a maelstrom of deep blues, fiery crimsons, and defiant streaks of gold leaf. Her style had been reborn alongside her. The dreamy, gentle landscapes of Elara Vance were gone, replaced by the raw, unapologetic, and complex strength of Elara Prescott. A soft coo, a sound that had become the anchor of her existence, drifted from a beautifully carved bassinet near her desk. A smile bloomed on her face, genuine and unforced. She walked over and looked down at her son Leo. He was 6 months old, a perfect fusion of chubby cheeks, impossibly long eyelashes, and a tuft of dark hair that seemed to have its own rebellious agenda. He blinked up at her, with eyes the color of a summer sky her eyes, and she felt a surge of love so fierce and profound it was almost overwhelming. She gently lifted him from the bassinet, his familiar weight a comfort in her arms. He smelled of milk and innocence. Cradling him close, she walked to the vast window. "Look, my love," she whispered, her voice soft. "Look at our city." This tiny, perfect soul was the reason for everything. During the darkest days after the confrontation with Julian and the shocking public revelation, it was the thought of him, the steady rhythmic beat of his heart inside her, that had been her true north. He was the reason she hadn't crumbled. He was the reason she had fought back, not with vengeance, but with purpose. Being his mother had grounded her in a way she never expected, giving her a sense of clarity that transcended both her art and her immense inheritance. The foundation had become a formidable force for good. The initial $500 million endowment had been just the start. Under her sharp, intuitive leadership, a trait she had clearly inherited from her father, though she wielded it with far more compassion. The Alara Foundation had become a beacon of hope. It had opened 3 state-of-the-art residential centers for single mothers, holistic communities that provided not just safe housing, but on-site childcare accredited job training programs in tech and healthcare, and a team of pro bono lawyers to help them navigate custody and child support battles. Alara was not a distant benefactor. She knew the names of the women, the stories of their children. She had sat with them, listened to their fears, and celebrated their triumphs. Her phone buzzed on the desk, a text from her father, Alistair. It was a link to a Wall Street Journal article detailing the Foundation's disruptive and highly successful model of philanthropy. Below the link was a single, uncharacteristically emotional message from him. "Your mother would be proud. I am too." Alara's eyes welled with tears. The thawing of her relationship with Alistair had been one of the most unexpected gifts of the past year. He had seen her command a boardroom, dissect a financial report, and then seamlessly switch to soothing her crying son. For the first time, he saw her not as his wayward daughter, but as his successor, a leader in her own right. He doted on his grandson, the gruff industrialist melting at the sight of Leo's gummy smile. The respect between them was new, hard-won, and precious. Another buzz this time from Chloe. "Heads up. Saw an article on one of those sad little business blogs. Your ex is now selling luxury yachts in Fort Lauderdale. Looks like he found his level. Hope he's a good swimmer." Alara read the text, and a small, wry smile touched her lips. A year ago, news of Julian might have stirred something in her, a flicker of anger, a pang of satisfaction. Now there was only a profound sense of detachment. He was a character from a book she had finished long ago. He was a man defined by surfaces, by the shiny objects he could acquire for others. It was a fitting, pathetic purgatory, for him forever on the decks of other people's dreams. Never the captain of his own. He had no power here in this room in her life. A knock came at her office door. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Prescott, Arthur Kensington is here for your 10 o'clock. "Send him in, thank you," she replied. Arthur entered, his face, which she had once associated with the stern legalities of her family, now softened by a familiar grandfatherly smile. "Good morning, Alara, and good morning to the chairman of the board," he said, winking as he peered into the bassinet where she had just placed Leo back down. "He's a tough negotiator," Alara laughed. "He's demanding a merger with a nap company." "A wise investment," Arthur chuckled. He handed her a folder. "The board members from the museum are downstairs. They are exceptionally pleased with our proposal to sponsor the new wing for emerging artists. Your name is already being spoken in the same breath as Guggenheim and Whitney." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Arthur," she said, though a flush of pride warmed her cheeks. "We're just getting started." As she gathered her notes for the meeting, she paused one last time by the window. She had come to this city seeking a small, anonymous life, a life where her name was a burden she could shed. She had learned through the harshest of lessons that you cannot run from who you are. The only path forward is to encompass every part of yourself, the pain and the privilege, the artist and the heiress. Julian had thought he was destroying her by taking away the simple life she cherished. He couldn't have been more wrong. He had merely shattered the beautiful, fragile cage she had built for herself. He had forced her out into the open, compelling her to face the power she had always possessed, but had been too afraid to wield. She looked at Leo, her beautiful son, her true legacy. Her life's work would not be defined by the Prescott name or the billions in the bank. It would be defined by him and by the world she was trying to shape in his name, a world that was a little kinder, a little fairer, and a lot more beautiful. The fog had lifted not just over the city, but within her soul. The view was at last perfectly clear. And that's the story of how Elara Prescott's world fell apart, only to be rebuilt stronger and more magnificent than ever before. It's a raw, powerful reminder that sometimes the deepest betrayals can lead to the most profound self-discoveries. Julian Vance saw weakness where there was quiet strength, and his ignorance cost him everything. Elara left with nothing remembered. She had everything, and used it not for revenge, but for renewal. Her story isn't just about the stunning revelation of a secret identity. It's about a woman reclaiming her power, her name and her narrative, and building a legacy of compassion for her child. What did you think of Julian's ultimate fate? Was it justice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Share it with someone who loves a story of strength and resilience, and make sure you subscribe for more incredible real-life dramas. Your support means the world. Thank you for listening.